Good evening, Vancouver. Welcome back to Canucks After Dark. It is Monday, June 30th, and it is, I think, technically free agency. I think they changed it so contracts end at 9 p.m. But either way, it's free agent frenzy, preview, draft review, Evander Kane, whatever else happened, I think is sort of our plan for tonight. But as always, joined by my co-host, Canuck Clay. How are we doing today, Clay?
Speaking of frenzy, I love that shirt, Parker. That looks good.
Thank you. We're getting in the summer mood. It's kind of blue and green, I guess, if you want to really stretch it, like Evander Kane's suit. Exciting night tonight. Could be more exciting because it feels like way too much happened today to make tomorrow interesting. A lot of names came off the board of a lot of extensions, sign and trade, which is something we don't see a lot. But we, of course, have the draft to talk about. We've got a big trade for the Canucks to talk about. And, of course, free agency starting tomorrow, where the Canucks have a little bit of cap to do a little bit of stuff. So we'll get into that, of course, as always.
Yeah, we'll get into this. But I was just going to say I'm focused on tomorrow, ready to react to anything. But as you and I were kind of joking, but not joking, just before we pressed go live, with only $7 million, unless they move a lot of other things, they might not be able to do a lot tomorrow. But I know we'll talk about that. But one thing got out of in my rearview mirror. One personal thing: my daughter Kayla graduated high school, pulled an all-nighter, did her after grad, which was pretty cool. And after 3 hours sleep, we threw a grad party. So she's officially done high school. So I'm not an empty nester, because if they're like me, they're mama's boys and they're gonna stay at home until they get married. But at least we have no more kids in high school. So that's an accomplishment for the emo household for sure.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Look, you say $7 million. You're forgetting about the other $31,667. Okay? You can get a game of a player out of that.
That's true. That's a huge negotiating factor. Okay, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. But no, it's interesting because obviously I think sort of our agenda for the night is to go in chronological order. So we'll start mostly on the draft, which was Friday. I guess technically Evander Kane was before that, so we can work that out how we need to. We'll talk about all of the signings that have happened around the NHL today and what that means for the Canucks and names that have come off the board, right? Mitch Marner was a name that we sort of jokingly talked about. That's off the table, obviously. But also some interesting other stuff like Alex Pietrangelo, but the Canucks made a bunch of AHL sort of level signings in Baines, Brisebois, Ratu, and Sasson, which we'll talk about all those. And then closer to the end, we'll talk about, $7 million of cap space. We sort of know what the roster is going to shake out to be, right? No big trades, especially, Canucks made their first round pick, which we weren't really sure was going to happen. So we'll talk about sort of what this team looks like right now, because essentially they've got 11 forwards signed at the NHL level if you don't include Ratu. And we can figure out what this sort of season is going to look like, because $7 million in today's market, where you have a $95.5 million cap that is expected to go up and up and up. It's not a lot of money anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I love your plan, Parker. That's why you drive the bus. Chronological order. So I've been talking all week on my shows. What was your reaction when you found out 8 a.m. that I think it was that Wednesday morning or whatever it was? Day after my birthday. Not that it was a gift to me, but what was your first reaction when you heard the Canucks had traded for Evander Kane?
Yeah, so it was Wednesday. It was Wednesday early. If I remember correctly, I was leaving the house on the way to the office, and it just, because I have Twitter notifications on for two people, and that's Rick Dollywall and Elliot Friedman.
Those are the only two you need, truly.
Well, I don't use Twitter, but that's how I get notifications for things that happen.
Yes.
So I get a notification from Elliot Friedman that just says Evander Kane's being traded to the Canucks. And normally I see an Elliot Friedman notification and I think, something else going on in the league. But nope, it said to the hashtag Canucks at the end of it. And my immediate thought was, why? But then it was also, okay, I need to like immediately look up like what's the term, because I didn't realize he was on the last year of a contract. And then like age is another one, because obviously he's been around for a while, but I wasn't sure if he was like 34, 30, or 35. Like I knew he was sort of somewhere in that range. But yeah, got the notification, and it was right as I left the house. So I put on 650 on the way, and it was Halford and Brough, and Jason Brough was having a bit of a meltdown over it. Mike Halford was trying to play mediator, and Sat Shaw was also not very happy because he was also on at the same time. So I was sort of processing everything at once. My immediate reaction was, this seems really, in a vacuum, it seems like a great move, but we don't live in a vacuum.
Yeah.
We live in a world where Evander Kane, has been on that Vegas balcony with the wad of cash. We live in the world where there's been all these other, disputes outside of the game. And, he's a guy who has a lot of baggage that comes with him. And coming to a team where there's always been a bit of a locker room issue that, in theory, we got rid of the source of, at least this year's locker room issue, to then go and bring in another one, seemed short-sighted, I would say. That was my first reaction. I'm curious to get yours, and then maybe I'll go into where I'm at now.
Sure. It's funny. I think we're going to go into, we might be whatever. Let me just talk. When I first, so it's funny, Parker, same thing. I was getting in my car, going to my office, and I did what I hate doing. Like I always preach about how, all these guys, these clickbaity content creators, and I'd rather grow properly and make sure that I have all the facts before I do a vlog. No speculation, no clickbait, no rumors. And here I am rushing to do a quick 3-minute video when I know nothing about the return. I know nothing about the contract. I know absolutely nothing. So in my first 3-minute vlog, I actually said I didn't mind it because I had heard that it was a pick going the other way. I didn't know what the pick was. But I didn't even know that we were retaining all 5.125. So I didn't know any of that stuff. So in my vacuum, I said, this is a guy who can still skate. Okay. He can certainly hit. Like I shudder every time one of our Canucks defensemen goes behind our own net, because he can still, I remember him crunching Hronik at times and other things. So I was okay with it. And then I posted my 3-minute vlog, and then I got on the road, and then I started to think about all the transgressions. Started to listen to, maybe I was listening the exact same time you were, honestly, Parker, to Halford breaking down.
Because it was about 12 minutes after it happened.
Yeah. So there we go. So my first reaction to answer your question was I didn't mind it. That's what I said in my vlog.
Okay. So here's the breakdown, and then we'll get into our current thoughts. So
sure.
Evander Kane, 1-for-1 for a 4th-round pick in this year's draft that just passed. So return-wise, negligible, right? Yeah. I think we're all of the opinion that a 4th-round pick is like a 1 to 2% chance of a player that's going to be good in the NHL, and like a 3% chance of a player that will ever play an NHL game. Okay. Like it's essentially nothing as the return, unless that player ends up being an absolute star and they'll never hear the end of it. Right. But you're getting in return Evander Kane, 1 year left on his contract, $5.125 million, and he is 33 years old. Now he turns 34 in about a month. So his 34-year-old season. The thing to keep in mind, did not play a regular season game this year. Right. Last year had 44 points in 77 games. He scored 20 goals basically every year of his career, regardless of the length of the season, 30 goals. But if you just look in the games played column of his career, you will not see an 82. He's never played a full season. He's always had some health issues. You look back at 2017-18, he played 17 games. And then of course this year didn't play a single regular season game, came back for the playoffs and was fairly effective. 12 points in 21 games. Yeah. By all metrics and everything he said, he thinks that time off was good for him and he's got some rest. And it's crazy. In a career where he's never played a full season, he's 70 games off of 1,000. So he's been in the league for, this would be his 17th season, I believe I remember him saying, as he joined the league in 2009, 2010. So he's been in the game for a long time. 617 points in those 930 games. So a 4th-round pick for a player of that caliber at $5 million, essentially, with all the contracts we've seen floating around, and it's a 1-year deal. In a vacuum, that's a good acquisition, I think. But of course, we're not in a vacuum. Now, of course, that's what I said at the beginning when I said I wasn't super happy at the beginning with this trade. Do I think Evander Kane is the best person necessarily? Maybe not, but of course, we don't know everything. Now that I sit back and think about it, every time Evander Kane has gone to a new team, it's been a really good honeymoon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You look at, obviously he started his career in Atlanta for 2 years, then Winnipeg, and was effective, and then got moved to Buffalo. Goes to Buffalo, 35 points in 65 games. Goes to San Jose, 14 points in 17 games. Right. That's a season he barely played, almost a point a game in that time. Sort of has to have a reset right after his time in San Jose. Goes to Edmonton, 39 points in 43 games. And really, his time in Edmonton has been fairly drama-free, I think. Yep. So if that's the player you're getting, Edmonton needed the cap, and there's people who say, oh, why would you help Edmonton? They need the cap. There was other teams that would have given them that cap relief, but he wanted to come here. I'm starting to be fairly okay with it because I think at absolute worst, you can probably cut bait this year. Like in the middle of the season, you could just trade him off to somewhere for a 7th and you're out a 4th. That's fine. Or maybe he's fairly productive and maybe he continues his 20-goal ways and he puts up 40 points in 70 games, because that's all he usually plays. And you end up with a pretty decent piece that, if you make it to the playoffs, becomes a weapon, like an actual dangerous piece. It's funny, if you look at the math, in his career, he averages about 1.2 penalty minutes per game. In the playoffs, he averages 2.5. So he's a different player in the playoffs. He's double the penalty minutes. Even this last postseason, 21 games, 44 PIMs. So he's a menace out there, but he can produce. So I'm starting to be more okay with it.
Cool. No, good breakdown. Actually, thank you for that. We do wind up in the same place. So I said I was okay with it. And then as I thought about the 5.12, it wasn't so much that we had to pay. Sorry, it wasn't so much what we gave up, which I agree. In a 4th is nothing. But the fact, helping Edmonton, whatever, but then them not retaining some, that was whatever. And there's the opportunity cost. What else could we have done with that 125? So then by lunchtime, when I had time to think about it, I actually was more neutral. I went from a little bit positive to more neutral. And then I've kind of come out of it kind of where you are, slightly back to the more optimistic side. And to me, Parker, you've always told me to talk about sports are a forgiving place and people love the redemption story. You're right. There's nothing but great stories. In fact, I heard positive stories about what he does in the community, that little girl in Edmonton who was battling cancer, like all these nice stories. And this whole thing about a locker room cancer, we didn't hear anything about that. In fact, it was the opposite that guys were saying in Edmonton. So, yes, you can't take away the other transgressions off ice that kind of that ended 4 or 5 years ago. I care about what he does on the ice, and I think as soon as he hits a big hit or as soon as he scores a great goal, I think Canucks fans will forget about it for a little while. But you're right. I think ultimately in the big picture, despite how optimistic we are, if the Canucks are not doing well, that is an asset that you can then trade maybe for even a higher draft pick than a 4th. And then, you come out a little bit ahead, although you use that $5 million all season. So I'm with you. I'm waiting to see what happens. Just because from a content creation and as a Canucks fan, I want him to do well. And if he does really well and they are forced to a decision July 1st next year, so be it. I'd rather have that problem than him be so bad that we've kind of wasted a year and wasted all that time and money.
Yeah, I think the maturity is a key part, right?
Yeah.
33 is, you're starting to get to an age where you'd hope isn't as much, as sort of teenagery, I guess you could say, right? Where, guys who are 23 with a lot of money compared to a guy who's 33 with a lot of money,
right.
And by all sources, the last few years have been better. What were your thoughts on his press conference? I assume you watched that.
I did, and I did a quick breakdown on my channel because it was just really funny. I was listening to the press conference with my daughter Kayla. We were doing some grad errands, And I said to her, "What do you think of this guy?" And she doesn't know anything about hockey, but she understands English. So she goes, "Very confident." I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
I said, "Cocky, Kayla?" She goes, "No, just confident." She goes, "I like the way he talks about that he's a winner and he wants to win and that he's won wherever he's gone." I said, "Okay, that's cool." I didn't mind it. There were like 3 points, Parker, where it almost went in. It was that little uncomfortable spot
could feel
where.
it.
Yeah, and all he had to say was one thing, and then it would. But whether it was saying, "Well, I could come dressed up as a bum," like that was one of them. About the suits, or Ian McIntyre, were you nice to me back then, or I can't remember whatever he said. But I think he was showing his personality. I actually came out of it saying, "Wow, at least this guy has some personality."
Yeah, I'd be on board with that. Again, I think it's really going to come down to his play on the ice.
Yeah.
If he comes out and if he ends up being a top 6 winger and he's producing and he's throwing the body around and he's healed, I think is the big thing. I think people rally around him. And I hope to be in that situation.
Yes.
I'm not there yet,
Yes.
but we'll see. And you mentioned, the opportunity cost. I think today as a whole has really shown that free agents are going to be expensive this year because there's so few out there, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're at a point where Brock Besser is like a marquee top 2 free agent on the board for tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? Like Pius Suter is going to get airtime on Sportsnet and TSN tomorrow. So that opportunity cost, I think, hurts a little bit less because I think a guy like Evander Kane in free agency is probably fetching a good bit more than that 5.125 that he's getting now. So I look at the opportunity cost. I think I'm a little bit less concerned because I don't know how active the Canucks are going to be tomorrow on the free agency front. If they were going to be active, I think it's going to be on one of the 2 guys that was already in their system, in Besser or Suter.
Right.
And going in with 7 and a little bit, as opposed to, let's say 12-2. I don't think it makes a big difference, right? You can make more of a splash with that 12-2, but I don't know if there's anyone that I'm looking at making a big splash on tomorrow. And I'm a little bit less worried about that opportunity cost because I think any guy that you're going to get that's going to be a difference maker, you're probably having to trade for.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, and I'll save it in about 20 minutes when we talk about free agency. But yeah, we could actually be looking at a team potentially if we re-sign one of those 2, likely Suter over Besser, if it's one of the 2, where really the only difference is we have Kane instead of Besser. Like that could be the true fundamental difference on our team.
Yeah, and is that a little concerning because this team was not a playoff team last year,
Right.
But if you look at it as maybe we're adding Thatcher Demko, maybe that helps.
Yeah, and I do look at, like, not to jump the gun here, but a full season with this strong decor, and a full season with a healthy Demko. What if? You never know.
Yeah, you think of giving Marcus Pettersson a training camp with this team.
Yes,
right.
yeah.
Giving Victor Mancini a training camp with this team. Giving Elias Pettersson a training camp could be a big impact. And who knows if the new coach is a positive or a negative.
I totally forgot about that. Yes.
yeah. Rick's gone, man. He's in Philly doing something else.
Yeah, Philly. Yeah, Philly and the Islanders. I was really intrigued by what they did on the draft. Okay, so maybe that's a good segue to the draft then. Okay, so both you and me, Evander Kane, we're okay with it. Let's see what he does on the ice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing is, if you need to cut your losses aren't that big.
There you go. Very good.
Okay, NHL Draft this most recent Friday, a couple of days ago. Can we start with just saying it really shouldn't have taken the 4.5 hours that it took?
Parker, I joked that I said, the question for me isn't if the Canucks are going to trade or keep their 15th pick. The question for me is, will I get to witness that pick before I have to leave the house at 11 for my daughter's aftergrad?
I had a couple people over, and we had plans just have a couple beers, have some pizza, watch the draft. We do that for the NHL Draft and the NFL Draft every year.
Yep.
And they weren't able to make it until 5. So an hour after the draft started, I think they missed the first 6 picks.
Yeah.
It was brutally slow. especially with not having any of the teams there.
Yeah.
And having like the guys from the Goo Goo Dolls come out and then like have to stand in the corner while they're talking to the managers for the first time. I hated it. I thought it was absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And you know this, you can appreciate this because you're a tech guy. You understand this. You do Zoom and Teams calls all the time. And I do too. We get that with Zoom, there's already a delay. Then there's worries about feedback, pumping the audio from Zoom into the house, right? Then going back into the microphone. So those two things alone, and then add an awkward 18-year-old teenager who's probably never spoken in front of a couple thousand people before, let alone GMs and presidents of teams. Yeah, it was. I don't blame the kids for free. Like that was my daughter's age, right? Like could I see her do wow an audience and with strangers they've never met? It pretty tough. So you're right. It made for some awkward moments for sure.
Yeah, I look back at 18-year-old me. I'm not doing well under that pressure. And especially like I'm on Teams and Zoom calls every day.
Yes.
None of them have the delay that those had. Like they were bad. It was, and they'd like be talking over each other and the feedback in their rooms because someone just set up a couple speakers. It was a mess. But it sounds like they will never do that again, which is good. So maybe we'll start at the top. Matthew Schaefer going to the Islanders. Really good moment.
Yeah.
I think that might be the first time I've teared up a little bit during a draft.
Yep.
But it got me a bit. Of course, we're all watching thinking, okay, are the Canucks going to pick at 15? Right?
Yep.
That was what we've been told for weeks and weeks and months, is that it's unlikely the Canucks will pick at 15. They're going to try to trade for a number 2 centerman. Rossi was the big name in the news. He, I think, is still unsigned. He's still with the Wild in their system. But he is. The Canucks did not make a move for a Rossi or for a trade and then a sign, and instead they go with Braeden Cootes with the Seattle Thunderbirds. 18 years old, February birthday, so 18 and a couple months. The guy who I think we talked about last week because he was the name that was floated around, point per game player, but really projects to be about a 2C. Right? A real Bo Horvat-esque player. He's worn the C everywhere he's gone. That just, like everything sort of, like he wore the C for the Team Canada under 18s. Had 12 points in 7 games there. It really sounds like that's sort of the guy that the Canucks went for.
Yeah, and it's funny. I make no bones about. I don't lie. I know nothing about prospects. I always say that I make videos about guys once we get them, not before. Why waste my time, right? So, especially in a year where I didn't think they were even going to pick. So, but when I did the research, the leadership is what sticks out to me. Even on the broadcast, Parker. Not sure if you could hear it with your buddies over. They were raving about his leadership and the fact this is a future captain of the team for sure. So the guys on Sportsnet at least thought this was a really, really good pick. Yeah, you're right. He's not going to be a 1C. He's going to be a 2C. Maybe he doesn't have the same NHL ready body as Bo, but he's got determination. The replay that they showed on TV, it was a beautiful
the one he
move to the
scores
net.
and goes after the guy.
Then he gets plowed into the net in the post, and then he goes after the guy. So I like it, and I also liked how he sounded after when he was doing his interviews and stuff. Mature kid. So when it reminded me of Bo that way. The only difference, like I said, was maybe the body type. But he's a gamer, a good playmaker, a good 200-foot guy. So and you're right. This is the only guy apparently that the Canucks took out for dinner at the combine. So it's good. This is not a surprise at all.
No, and I was going to bring up that same clip because we're sort of sitting there like, they didn't, like we were hoping for like, let's go get Marco Rossi. Let's get crazy.
Yeah.
And then they make the pick and I'm like, hey, like whatever. We don't really know much about this guy. And then, they showed that clip where he goes in, scores a goal, gets absolutely run over into the net or into the post or something. And instead of celebrating with his team, he turns around and just guns after the guy that ran him. And we sort of look at each other. We're like, all right, we're on board. That's all we needed. Like that's good. So I'll read the Elite Prospects quote here.
Sure.
A one-man forecheck. Coots' motor and energy are undeniably elite. In a single shift, he can amass multiple retrievals, guiding opponents into a big hit, spinning off a check and passing. winning another race by winning inside position meters before the boards, and repeating over and over until the puck finds twine. Primarily a playmaker, he escapes with quick passes inside and occasionally deceives opponents to find a backdoor option. After passing, he dashes the net to create traffic and collect loose pucks. I don't think I've ever heard meters before the boards before. It's definitely a Canadian elite prospects write-up. But yeah, a motor guy, right? Leadership, just always going. And that's great. And you hope that that's a guy that can develop and become a heck of a hockey player, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm okay. I'm okay with this pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I when Eklund was available, just because everyone was saying Eklund or Aitchison was really good, I was kind of hoping maybe we go off of our board, but our board had Coots up ahead.
By the way, thank you with the emphasis in Evander Kane 91 member for 9 months. Thank you very much.
Apparently, Evander's been a fan for a while.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very
okay,
much.
So we're okay on Coots.
So the Canucks made 5 other picks during the NHL draft. Did you watch any of day 2 at all, or did you just get the notifications?
No, I was sleeping for the first half, and then, I just got the noties, for sure.
So 47, second round pick. Canucks go goalie, which is a little weird because if you look at the systems we've got Demko for 1 more year, and it sounds like some more. Lankinen, Shelovs, who we might have to get rid of, Tolopolo, and then now we have Alexei Medvedev, goaltender for the London Knights out of Ontario. Young goalie, 17 years old, played 34 games this year, had a 9.12. Seemed like a bit early to go goalie for the Canucks that don't have a big need for it, but sounds like got the Ian Clark stamp of approval. Any thoughts on Medvedev?
Yeah, a couple. This is our first goalie since 2022, Ty Young. You're right. A lot of teams, they'd like to take a goalie once a year or at least once every 2 years. So that's once 3 years for us. And I guess you can never have too many goalies in the system. I know we got Tolopilo, we got Young, and that's not even counting Shelovs, who are likely going to move. So we do have good goalies, and that Koskenvuo, I keep forgetting about him. But yeah, what I liked about this guy, Parker, I watched his interview with Canucks.com. He's hilarious. Every answer, he's like, it was a really good year. Yeah, like he talks like that. But he also talked like Braeden Cootes did about being a winner. He's won all his life, and that's all he wants to do. So I'm fine with hearing my first 2 picks talking about how much they want to win and how much they've been winning throughout their young career already. I like this kid. He's going to grow into his. What were they saying, that he's grown 3 or 4 inches in the past year and a half? So
yeah, he's officially listed at 6'2", 178, but you never know, right?
Right. So I'm. You never know. You're right about goalies getting picked so early, but I was okay with this pick as well. Apparently, we probably listened to the same interview. This is their guy. They had him on their radar. So
yeah, and it's tough, right? Because this is a guy who might play NHL games in 6 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Guys don't really make it for a while. Line change does say Medvedev looking like a home run with a $3 donation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, line change. I thought it was human resources. Thank you, Tyler. We appreciate you.
65. So I guess that would be first pick of the 3rd round.
Yep.
We picked Kieran Dervin, center, who played just 10 games for the Kingston Frontenacs in the OHL, which is not a team I knew existed. He only had 3 points in those 10 games and then 3 points in the 11 playoff games. Now, normally when you get a guy early 3rd, they're close to a point a game in the OHL.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one because he produced very well at the U18 level at St. Andrews College.
Yeah.
It's a weird one because I know nothing about this guy, but I just look at the stats and it's lower production than we'd expect at that level.
Yeah, when I read about this guy, again, this is where I admit I know nothing. It's just what I read.
Yep.
He seems like also a 2-way center, but I guess not as good as Coots. That's why he was picked in the 3rd round. There's my analysis for you, Parker.
It's perfect. I love it. 143 overall. I got to do the math. That's got to be our 5th, right?
Let's go with that.
Left winger out of Djurgårdens, Wilson Bjork, 19 years old, had, let's do some math here, 67 points in 43 games in Sweden, 6', 165. What I've noticed from a lot of the guys that get drafted is they are all very skinny nowadays.
Yes.
So many guys who are like, yeah, he's 6'4", 170. It's like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. 28 goals, 39 assists out of Stockholm. 19 years old, so an overager, I believe, technically. Let me see if I can pull up the old elite prospects. Jan 13, 2006. So, yeah, an overager.
Yeah.
Didn't get drafted last year. Yeah, stepped up his production, right? Last year had 24 points. This year, 67 in almost the same amount of games. Also, had about 4x the PIMS.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, Parker. Didn't he have like 91 penalty minutes or something?
He went from 24 to 98 in almost the same amount of games. So 4 times the amount, which I kind of respect. Did get a handful of games in the Allsvenskan, which is the second tier Swedish league. Didn't get a point in those 10 games, unfortunately. But had 4 points at the U19s, and he's going to Colorado College this year and will probably play for the Swedish World Junior team.
Right. Now, the Sportsnet link I'm looking at listed as a left winger, but I heard either Drance or someone ask Alvin if he was a center, and they said yes. So maybe he can play center as well. What does that prospects page say? Center or left wing? Or does it say?
Left wing is his
it does. Okay.
official listing. Oh, left wing / center. So either or.
So maybe this is a skinny guy who's got a bit of a nasty streak. So I don't know who that comparable is, but...
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Then we jump to, I think, the 6th round, 175 overall. Canucks like Gabe Sherratt out of the Brampton Steelheads in the OHL.
Yeah.
Had 35 points, 66 games this year, 21 of those being goals. Right winger, 5'11", 190, so a little bit larger.
Finally, a guy who weighs more than I do, Parker. That's good.
Well, yeah, right? Like a guy who weighs more, like a normal weight for their age or for their height. More of a right winger, sort of a goal scorer in theory, or off the puck kind of guy.
I believe this is Ben Sherratt's kid, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, it's cousin. Okay.
Yeah.
Whoops. Okay. All right.
And then 7th round, Matthew Lansing, center out of Waterloo in the USHL.
Yeah.
8 goals, 9 assists in 40 games in that league. Sort of around where he was ranked. He was sort of ranked in the early 200s. They picked him 207. Again, probably a guy we'll never see play. But, it's a 7th round pick.
Yeah. So typically, Parker, just to wrap up this draft part, you look at the first 2 or 3 rounders, right? That's really the guys. There's always outliers, but those are the kind of guys that you look at making hopefully at least a chance to make the team. Everywhere I see they don't give the Canucks an A grade, but they don't give a D failing grade either. I've seen a lot of B's and C pluses as a draft grade.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where like Braeden Cootes, right, where you have guys like Eklund on the board still and HSN on the board, where a lot of scouting had them top 10 picks.
Yeah,
but then of course you ask the Canucks like, hey, why didn't you go for those guys? And like, well, they were lower on our draft board.
Sure.
So it's all down to the scouts that are looking at them. Centers inherently have more value than wingers, typically. However, you probably shouldn't draft that way, and it doesn't sound like that was their intent.
Right.
But yeah, you look at this draft, and you sort of look at, you had 15, 47, and 65, and then you didn't have anything to 143. So 15, you want to hit. 47 would be nice. 65 would be nice.
Yeah.
If you get 3 NHLers out of that, it's a successful draft.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
That's pretty well a given.
And to tie a bow on this, we didn't have a 4th rounder because that went to Edmonton for
Evander Kane
trade. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So that was the draft. I don't think it's too early to call any winners or losers, etc. But then, of course, we had the last 3 days, essentially, for other stuff to happen. Trades. You have Noah Dobson going to Montreal, which was interesting. You've got, obviously, the Canucks making some signings. You've got Mitch Marner to Vegas. So how do we want to attack this? Do we want to just talk about Canucks stuff first, then go into the rest of the league?
Yeah. Why don't I give a quick 90-second primer on what the Canucks did today and give you a chance to load up where we go next? How does that sound? Does that work? Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Canucks had 10 restricted free agents. So unlike Brock Besser and Pia Suter, who can go to any team, including the Canucks had to make decisions on these guys. It's basically make or break time for a lot of these players. They end up signing for, extending 2, giving them a couple weeks to decide, and then releasing 4. So let's talk about who they released first. Defenseman Cole McWard, defenseman Christian Felton, left winger Ty Glover, and left winger Tristan Nielsen. Nielsen was a standout in the Calder Cup run, some big hits. So that doesn't mean that he can't, although any of those guys can't return to the organization as a free agent, but it means that the Canucks, for now, do not have any intent to sign those guys. Jet Wu, defenseman, and Nikita Tolopilo, goaltender, they were extended qualifying offers. That means they get a 1-year contract offer based on a certain formula of last year's contract. They have 2 weeks to accept that. They can also negotiate a new contract with the Canucks while in those 2 weeks. But by July 15th, if they do not accept those offers, they to become unrestricted free agents. So keep that in mind. Jet Wu and Nikita Tolopilo, usually players accept their qualifying offers because they really have no bargaining power at all. And then finally, the Canucks did sign 4 guys, as Parker alluded to, all weird, all different ways. Aatu Ratu, 2 years, 1 way. That means he's going to get paid $775,000, whether he's in Vancouver or Abbotsford for the next 2 seasons. So that's Aatu Ratu. Max Sasson, 1 year, 1 way. So he's going to get his $775,000 either way, but only for 1 season. And then 2 weird ones. Arshdeep Bains is 2 years, but it's 2-way for the first year, 1-way for the second year. So $775,000 salary in Vancouver for both years. But in his first year, if he's in Abbotsford, he only makes $300,000. And then finally, Guillaume Brisebois, defenseman, who seems to always stick around on 1-way deals or 1-year deals. His 1 year, 2-way. So he has his $500,000 if he's in Abbotsford, $775,000 up top. So all 4 guys, Ratu, Sasson, Bains, and Brisebois, are making $775,000, which if any of those guys hit for the Canucks, that's huge savings that you could, again, use in other places.
Excellent. So let's start on the qualifying offers. McWard, Felton, Glover, Nielsen.
Yeah.
Again, when we're at this level, we're not talking about guys who are going to make the team be impact.
Yeah.
If they were to make it, they'd be at the bottom of the totem pole. Cole McWard, Akito Hirose as well, who sounds like he's going to free agency tomorrow.
Yeah.
Guys who were good stories 4 years ago, I want to say, like a long while ago, that never cracked the squad, right?
Yeah.
Jet Wu, of course, still has a bit of potential to be a tweener. Nikita Tolopilo has, some potential to essentially just be the number 1 goalie in Abbotsford, I would assume. Once we have to get rid of Shilas, we'll talk about that. 4 signings made. So Aatu Ratu, 2 years, $775,000. This guy could be in your top 6 next year or this year, even if he takes that step. Right. That was sort of what his draft projection was 5 years ago. Now, 2021, so 4 years ago. When he was a 2nd-round pick. But you look at last year, right? 11 points in 33 games. Went to Abbotsford, was a point-a-game player. If he can be a 40-point player in the NHL, that's big, especially at $775,000.
Yeah.
Max Sasson gets 1 more year. All motor, right? Like, that's a guy who you can stick on your 4th line. He'll be very good. We saw it in bunches this year where he, was fairly decent. And again, could really be a guy who is either on your 4th line all year or could be your 13 or could be in Abbotsford, right? I think either way works out pretty well. Arshdeep Bains, I think, will probably be more on the AHL side. Had a really interesting playoff where he was very unproductive for the first half and then was lights out the second half where he was scoring a bunch of points.
Yeah.
And again, you're hoping for a guy who could step up and play 4th line minutes if you need him to, maybe even 3rd line if you need him to, but probably needs a little bit more seasoning. And then Guillaume Brisebois is an interesting one because he's been with this organization since 2017.
I think he's older than me, Parker. Yeah. He's old guy.
Canucks drafted him 10 years ago in the 3rd round. 10 years ago, 2015. He played 2 more years in the Q and then went to Abbotsford, or Utica, I should say. and has been in Utica basically every year since.
Wow.
And that's, he's a great AHL player who is, with this organization seemingly through and through. And the Canucks, reward him decently on the pay scale. So a bunch of RFAs that they cleaned up, right? They all happened within, I think, 10 minutes of each other. It was all just 1, 2, 3, 4. But yeah, nothing to complain about here. These are all contracts that if you send them to the AHL, their salary disappears, right? They're all under that $1 million mark. And really, I look at this and I look at, I don't think Jet Wu is getting a lot of playing time. The Canucks D is fairly well situated. But I look at Ratu as a guy who has some potential to move up the lineup. Sasson as a guy who can make the lineup on a fourth line role.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I love the way you put it. And the contracts dictate it so, right? Ratu has the most potential. That's why he's got 2 years. And you're right. He should be middle six. Sasson, next, fourth pairing, as you said, 1 year. And then Baines, it makes sense. He's got 2 years, but the first year is the two-way contract because exactly what you just said. He's probably going to be a tweener, maybe first call-up or whatever it may be, and a waiver exempt, so he can go up and down still. So that the contracts, the way they're laid out, makes sense. And then the Breezeball, the guy you just can't get rid of, and not that we want to. Yeah, he's around still too.
Yeah, and I look at that Ratu deal, right? $775, right?
Yeah.
Cheap, right? Not even $1 million, not 1.2, not 1.5, as I think would have been fairly reasonable.
And 2 years,
that second year is big. Because if he takes that step and can be your 3C this year, and maybe you have Hedel as your 2C, hopefully he's healthy.
Sure.
But a guy who you're hoping can one day take that step into your 2C, if he takes that step in 26, 27, and you got him at 775, that's a big opening in your salary.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Like, we've had him obviously since the Horvat trade. He must have been only 19, right? Like, it feels like forever.
I think he was 20.
Yeah. And he's only 22 years old. And you're right, high pedigree. And because we didn't know we were going to get Hronek with that, with that whatever we got. So it was pretty crazy that Ratu was almost like the centerpiece there.
Yeah, that in the first that we flipped to.
Right. Yeah. It certainly wasn't Anthony Beauvillier, I'll tell you that much.
No. Other big Canucks news. Sammy Blais will be testing the free agent market tomorrow.
Yep.
I think it's reasonable. I don't think the Canucks have a spot for him to
He's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's not a number 2C, which is what we need. But he's he clearly is the definition of sort of too good for the A, not good enough for the NHL. He's sort of in that lane. So hopefully he does well for himself, but it doesn't sound like he'll be coming back. Yeah. What else happened? I think that was everything Canucks related.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, Well, I was going to say, let's talk about the other NHL stuff, and then we can bounce back to what we think is going to happen. That would be a good way to. So I guess you want to talk about the Marner thing? That was the biggest one, I guess, today.
Yeah, Mitch Marner signed and trade. So it sounded like, and this all happened in the last week. We'd heard Marner to Vegas for a while. And then apparently it sounds like the Leafs raised a bit of a fuss and said, hey, they can't be tampering like this. Yeah. And then Vegas apparently said, well, maybe if we trade you a guy, is it okay?
Yeah,
and
then they'll shut you up.
What happened. So they essentially say, okay, well, we'll give you Nick Waugh, and in return, we will get Mitch Marner at an 8x12. So a $96 million contract, which kind of seems like a steal for Mitch Marner. I thought he'd be in the 13-14 range.
Yeah. I saw those projections as well. Yeah.
So Mitch Marner officially signed with the Leafs today at an 8x12 with a full no move clause. I guess waived his no move clause to get traded to Vegas. Could you imagine if they orchestrated this and Mitch Marner said, I'm going to enact my no move clause? and was
so then there's then they catch Vegas for tampering. That's amazing. That's the great. That's perfect. A great plan.
It would have been perfect, but he didn't do that. He's going to Vegas. Vegas is stacked. They got all the Pietrangelo cap space, unfortunately, because he's sounds like he's essentially retiring. So yeah, Mitch Marner going to Vegas to play with Eichel.
And it's so of course we think the Vancouver Canucks fan base is crazy. The Leafs fan base, you can imagine. So they're either livid or whatever, because some are saying, "What, we got ripped off," and then others saying, "Hey, at least we got something, right?"
Yeah,
he would have walked
he was
away.
a UFA.
Yeah. But that story's gonna dominate. It was the biggest story today for sure, because it's not just Marner because he was the most prolific UFA, but he's going to a team that has a real neat knack for attracting these kind of guys.
Well, they're always just all in.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to rebuild. They don't want to do anything like that. They're just going to keep reloading as long as they can until they have no prospect pool and no players, which will happen hopefully soon.
Yeah. And the Pietrangelo one, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think when there was word a day or two ago that he was going to put on LTIR for the entire season, people didn't know the whole story. So there's a lot of snickering. Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Sure, it's LTIR. Oh, isn't that fascinating, convenient how it just frees up money for Marner, blah, blah, blah. And then, he puts out this really sad statement today. His hips are basically shot. He might not be able to play again.
Yeah, that's what McCrimmon said, right? He needs bilateral femur reconstruction.
That doesn't sound good.
That sounds awful. So sounds like he won't be playing anymore. Florida is an interesting one because they have apparently an absolute steal on Aaron Ekblad.
Oh gosh,
getting Ekblad for 8 more years at 6.1, which is thievery. Who everyone thought was making $10 million going forward. So they save 4 on the cap there, and then they turn that into somehow a 6-year extension for Brad Marchand. Now, this is the league that last year, when the Leafs tried to give Chris Tanev 7 years, the league stepped in and said, no, you can't do that. He will not be playing when he's 41.
Right.
And now Florida said, well, why don't we sign Brad Marchand until he's 43? And so $32 million is sort of the rumored number. I don't know if we've gotten an official number yet. But that at 6 years, that's what, 5.3 repeating, essentially. So a good chunk of change, which it sounds like is going to be, probably a little front weighted and maybe retiring in the long term. You never know.
Yeah.
But that's a long contract to give a 37-year-old.
And it's has it even been officially announced yet? It has, but the terms. Okay, but the NHL can't say it's not right if it's not being announced, but they won't. Like, it sounds like it's a done deal.
It hasn't been announced, but in theory, because I think that's what they did with Tanev last year, they could just sort of flip it and say, no, you can't do that. Because the rumor was Marchand was looking for 4 years by 8, which would have been 32 mil. But instead they spread it over 6, which is lower AAV. And then either you take the hit late or he retires fully or he LTIRs and you can, reclaim that space. Yeah. So it's interesting to see what they'll do there.
Yes. Okay. So, but I trust you've seen that graphic going around that they have 10 guys signed through 2030, and they're like the 10, like it's 7 forwards. They're amazing. All their good
crazy
guys.
Yeah.
By the way,
so
Evander
whoever
Kane
makes the
with
finals
another
next year.
Oh yeah.
Have fun with Florida.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. Another $2 donation from Evander Kane 91. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. What a core. And we can't even find like actual top 6 guys.
No, none of them out there. A couple other signings. Patrick Kane extending in Detroit. $3 million salary, could be 2.5 in potential bonuses. And then the other big one is the Edmonton Oilers in our division, extending Evan Bouchard 4 by 10.5, which is funny because regular season Evan Bouchard, that's a terrible contract. Playoff Evan Bouchard, it's a steal.
Ekblad at 6.1 though, and Bouchard at 10.5. Wow.
Yeah, that's tough.
Wow.
But Ekblad should have made 10. I think everyone.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's an Evan Bouchard issue. That's an Aaron Ekblad issue.
Yeah. By the way, the honorable one, James Moore, said they wanted to announce the Marchand deal after the NHL Board of Governors meeting, so there wouldn't be an outrage. Not a coincidence. I'll buy that theory. I will.
I'm on board with any theories. Now, here's the fun thing with the Edmonton Oilers. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 forwards technically under contract and 7 defensemen and 2 goalies. So they've got 22 guys.
Yeah.
They have not extended Jeff Skinner, who's a UFA, Corey Perry, Connor Brown, John Klingberg. They have $550,000 of cap space. So they are capped out with the roster that they have. So it's interesting to see what that's going to turn into. Connor McDavid is due for a big raise next year. Arvidsson will come off the books. Henrique will come off the books. And most of their defense come off the books next year. Ekholm, Wallman, Kulak, Stetcher, all UFAs next year. They are going to be tight to the cap after this season.
Yes. So they got to move people, is what you're saying, to get Brock Besser.
Well, they can't get Brock Besser unless they clear $7 million.
Right.
So are they? But where do you trade that? Where do you get rid of $7 million? If I'm looking at they still don't have a goalie.
Right.
They've got Skinner and Picard splitting 3.6.
Yeah.
They've got Nurse at 9.25 with a full no move for at least for the next 2 years. And then the only other guys making decent money is RNH at 5.125, Evander Kane money, and Zach Hyman at 5.5. And then you get to McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard territory.
Right.
Ekholm's making 6 for this year. Is this real? Did the Predators really retain 4% of Ekholm's contract?
4%?
Apparently. Yeah, $250K of a $6.25 million deal. Either way, they don't have any money to move, right? Yeah. I guess, they're paying Jack Campbell $2.3 this year for his buyout.
Wow.
But yeah, they've got no money. I don't know where they get better is the problem for Edmonton. Yeah. And if they are good enough to make it back to Florida again next year, what are they supposed to do? Sure.
Yeah, let's loop back to that Besser thing. But before that, Kuzmenko, by the way, 4.3 in LA for a year as well.
Yeah,
interesting.
Good change.
Yeah. So, as we turn this to what the Canucks can actually do, who they might actually go for, I love what you said. Yeah, Besser is top 3 now on everyone's board. I see Nick Ehlers up there, at least the one I'm looking at, and Gavrikov and Besser as the top 3. Then you could put Piasuter in the next batch, right? In the second tier. So there are. Okay, you laid it out. $7 million as of now for the Canucks. That's probably not even going to be enough to re-sign Besser if they wanted to without moving, but that is certainly enough to re-sign Suter if they want to. What do you think the Canucks do on Suter? Because we've heard, especially there's momentum in the afternoon growing. Oh, the Canucks are circling back, one last ditch effort, and Rick Dolly was like, "Well, pump the brakes." Yes, they are revisiting, but they're still far off from money. Do you think it's going to happen, and would you be okay if it happened? But before, I'll give you 2 seconds to think about that. Thank you, Evander Kane, for gifting 5 memberships. They go to Taryn, I Am Rappy, Daniel, Spartan, and someone to be named later. There's 4 I see listed. So thank you, Evander.
Thank you.
So what do you think?
It's interesting because, we always like to look at the lineup, especially on the forward side in pairs, right? We look at the D, and the D's pretty set, right? Hughes, Hronek, Patterson, Myers, and then
some combination of
Patterson, Mancini, or Forbert, or whoever you want to throw down there.
Sure.
Up front, you go Patterson to Brusque. You could put Evander Kane on that line, and that could be your first line.
I try that. I want to see that, actually.
I do too, honestly. I think that would be interesting. And then your second line is hopefully a healthy Philip Hedl. Maybe a Niels Höglander and a Connor Garland, who is rumored to be getting 6x6 as an extension.
Yeah.
He already makes 5. 6 years is a lot for a Connor Garland, but he's been very productive for the Canucks, so I don't think I'd hate that.
And percentage of cap is actually better as
It'll be better.
the cap
Yeah.
gets bigger. Yeah.
And then that leaves your third line as whoever your 3C is, whether that's I'm thinking. I mean, you got Ratu. I would say is your 3C unless you sign Suter. Right now, Suter would be better than Ratu, I think, in that role, but he's going to be more expensive for a 3C. And you put him with Joshua and Sherwood, maybe Drew O'Connor, whoever you want. And then your fourth line is whoever's left, right? It's Bluger. It's, did I say Sherwood yet? Sherwood was
Yeah, you
third
did.
line.
But it could be Sasson. It could be
Carlson,
yeah.
I think.
Oh, yeah,
should
Carlson.
probably get a spot. Sasson could get a spot. So it kind of is working out without Brock Besser. But I don't think it's fantastic, right? I think you have a middling forward group at that point.
That's a good way of putting it. You know who's not middling? Evander Kane is gifted 15 memberships while you're talking. So I won't read all 15 recipients, but there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. Evander Kane is our friend Jay. I don't know if you can see his profile picture. That's me with him, kneeling down beside Jay in his wheelchair. That's his avatar. So thank you, Jay. Now that we know who you are.
Memberships.
Yeah, 20 memberships tonight. That's pretty cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're very grateful. So, no, everything you said makes sense. Yeah, that's why, and you and I were talking right before we came on the air that our goalie's good, especially if they extend Demko, which also they think they're going to do. Our defense is great, a full season with the D core. But yeah, this forward group. So, are you suggesting that they should bring Suter, or are you saying no, go with a Philip Hito and then use that $7 million elsewhere?
It's tough because I think Pius Suter's a very valuable player.
Yeah.
However, I see him as a third liner.
Okay.
And I see $4.5 million as a lot for a third liner.
Yeah.
However, he does have the ability to play second line, to play your first PK, to play second power play. Like you can put him wherever, which does carry some value. But yeah, looking at the roster, it sort of feels like we've built, if everything goes right, and that's the problem, right? Because we said this at the beginning of last season. It was, if everything goes right, this team is a contender. And things did not go right, right? Things were bad, and this team missed the playoffs. So if everything goes right, I think you have a middling forward group, maybe around, let's say, 15th in the NHL. Call it middling. I look at our defense as Hughes Hronik, Pettersson Myers, and Mancini Forbert.
Yep.
As pretty good. I think that's top 10 because I think Hughes does a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And you know, I think there's some decent depth there, and there's not really any holes, right? I don't look at any of those guys and be like, oh, it's a liability when they're out there.
Yeah.
And then if Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen are healthy for the entirety of the year, you have a top 5 goalie tandem, right?
Sure.
Healthy
I'm with that.
Demko playing his best is a Vezina finalist, even if you call him top 5. And Lankinen is assuredly a top 5 backup in this league, I think is fair. So you put all those together and you go like, 15, top 10, call it 8th on defense and 3rd in goal. And you've got maybe the 7th best team in the NHL all together, if everything goes right. But things don't always go right, which is the problem, right? I look at this and I go, okay, well, what happens if you don't get 90-point Elias Pettersson back and you are stuck with 60-point Elias Pettersson, right? What happens if Demko gets hurt? What happens if, Philip Hedl goes down? What happens if they don't re-sign Pius Suter and now you have Ratu as your 3C and Bluger as your 4C, but then you lose a center and who comes up, right? Like, things don't go perfect in this league, and I don't think the Canucks have built a lot of buffer for themselves for if things go wrong. That's my concern. Now, I think it's too late to do anything about it, right? I don't think you can assuage that concern by, giving Brock Besser $8 million or even extending Pius Suter or going out and getting Nick Ehlers. I would love to go get a Nick Ehlers, right? I think that would be fun. I don't know how well that would work. And again, there's some risk there. So I think the Canucks are really sort of like this balancing act where if things work, this is a really good team. But I could also see them being a team that is in games where both teams are having 22 shots a night and they're losing a lot of 2-1 games and they're an 88-point team again. And that's my concern.
Everything you said makes sense. I was so impressed that you worked in the word assuage. I've never heard you use that before. That was very impressive. What I do want to ask you then, so there's rumors that they're at least kicking the tires on Mikhail Granlund, who's 33-year-old, but still a good 60-point producer. There's also rumors that they are not the favorites, though. It's like teams like St. Louis.
Yeah, it sounded like they were out almost.
Okay. So then my question to you then is, what do you, if we were doing a show tomorrow night, which we won't need to, what are we talking about? Like, are we talking about that the Canucks actually don't do anything and they keep that $7 million, or are they going to get like some lesser round to also beef up their middle six?
It's tough because I look at it and I would say, well, why would you keep that $7 million? That's a waste, right? Because we need to be pushing for the playoffs. We need to make the most of our cap.
Yeah.
But I don't see much to do with that $7 million, right? And I think giving Pius Suter $5 because we have $7 million is probably a mistake.
Yeah.
But also, what are you going to do with that $7 million all year? If we said, hey, Pius Suter have $5.5 million for 1 year because we have to do something with the cap, I would say, cool, fine, whatever. But that's not what it would be, right? It'd be 4 at 5.5, and now that hurts, or 4.5, or whatever that number is.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, well, I don't think that ages very well for the future of this team because we are not looking at, hey, I want to be a second round team this year only, right? We want to, we're hoping to win the Stanley Cup one day and be competitive long term. It's tough. I'm not sure I see, like, I'm thinking, like, where do I see this team becoming a contender? And it's just like, yeah, Pettersson needs to put 100 points up. Yeah, and that's sort of where it lies because the defense is decent. I'd say solid. Defense is solid. Goaltending's great if healthy. And if both of those last all year, it's really going to come down to, okay, Pettersson, you have to be the guy. Yeah. And if he can be the guy and he can step up, then this team's dangerous. And if he can't, then this team is just going to be drowning.
Yeah. Yep. Jonathan Drouin, you like him?
No.
Okay. That was quick. Jack Roslovic, you like him?
Well, Drouin's a winger. I don't think we need ringers.
Yeah. Well,
wingers, right?
We don't. And especially don't need
a 2C.
We especially don't need left wing. Yeah, I know. The only centers I see are Granlund and Suter.
I mean, yeah, Roslovic is a center, but he's a 2.5C.
Yeah,
right.
You're right.
He's a half a point a game guy who's 40-point guy. I think you're looking for a 60-point guy to be that 2C.
So where are those guys? Can Nick Ehlers play C?
He's slow. I don't think so.
Okay. Can you play C?
Yeah. I can play center, but not at an NHL level.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, more of a beer league level.
All right. Well, so I guess the moral of the story is you're silently or humbly warning us as Canucks fans not to expect anything big tomorrow.
I just don't see what they would do. They've got $7 million, right? And we look at what names are out there, right? And it's Nick Ehlers and not a lot else unless they go Pius Suter. But Pius Suter means that this forward group is the same minus JT Miller plus Evander Kane minus Brock Besser.
Yep, you're right.
That doesn't sound better.
No.
I look at the defense, and it's the same. However, you now get full camp of Pettersson, Mancini, Pettersson. I think the defense will be better.
Yeah.
And then, again, if Demko's healthy, this team is solid.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And honorable one, I think, no, when we talk about 7 million, that's already taking out Brock Besser and Pius Suter's money, correct?
Yeah, it's 46 mil in the forwards, not including Besser. It's 27 on the D plus a half. So that's 74 or $73.5 million. Another 9.5 for the goalies, and you are at 82. And then throw in 5 million for Oliver Ekman-Larsson while you're at it. And then you're at around 87, 88 is the
With
number.
Mikheyev.
88.5 million for a $95.5 million cap. So
Right. No,
Besser is not in that that calculation.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. Okay. Well,
and don't forget,
wow.
Ilya
We have no time for
Mikheyev.
people today. Ew. Yes, another 800 grand. All right. Oh, I forgot about the OEL that it shoots up to 5 million. Thank you for that sobering reminder.
Yeah, for these 2 years, and then it's down to 2.
Okay. Survive 2 more years. Okay, that's good. Great. Awesome.
All right, folks. Well, hopefully tomorrow's interesting. We'll see. Maybe we can go. Maybe we can do some offer sheeting or sign somebody. I don't know. It's probably going to be Pius Suter, is my guess. If I had to put money on it, it's safe. It's easy. It's we got 7 mil to play with. If you folks enjoyed the show tonight, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit like. We'll see when we do a next show. We haven't decided yet. Depends on how interesting tomorrow is. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Clay, any parting words this Monday night?
Well, it's funny. You joked around right at the start, Parker, how I guess at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, all of our players, actually, no, we talked about this offline. All the no movement clauses kicked in. So PD is here to stay, as well as some others. Then tomorrow, free agency, technically, correct me if I'm wrong, it opens at 9 a.m. Eastern or 12 a.m. Eastern.
It's 9 Pacific.
Yeah, 12 Eastern. And I'm in my head, I'm so stupid. I keep getting this confused with trade deadline day. So for some reason, I told someone, I'm so stupid. I told someone they got to announce everything by noon. I don't know what I was thinking. So yes, tomorrow, 9 a.m. our time, things can start and we just kind of see what happens. We go with the flow. Yeah, and you're right. It could be the most exciting thing we were talking about tomorrow. Collectively might be a Pius Suter extension.
Yeah. Well, folks,
see.
make sure to subscribe. Hit like. If you missed any part of the show, you can rewind back to the beginning. You can find it on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Apple, Google, Pocket Casts, whatever. Yeah, that's about it. We'll be back at some point that we don't know. So that's why you have to hit the notification bell, because then you will see next time we are live. Enjoy the day off tomorrow if you are in Canada. Enjoy the day off Friday if you are in the States. And we will see you next time.